I'm trying to do a developmental edit on my first draft, and it's an experience. We're gonna visualize this together, okay? Because the story completely falls apart, and I have an idea of where to start for that, and it's Celtic mythology. Yesterday actually was a really big breakthrough. I finished writing the chapters for book 3. So the entire first quarter of book 3 is written. I feel like the gears are turning. I'm actually about to draft again. I'm 7 chapters into draft 2 at the moment, and it's going well. It doesn't feel like it's another false start. I think I did figure out what I needed to. Small font, italicized, sarcastic quotation marks. It was the best of times. Bold, huge, huge font. It was the worst of times. I'm trying to do a developmental edit on my first draft, and it's an experience. I don't like it. I think the way that the last vlog on this project went, I ended it on a hopeful note because I was feeling hopeful. It was feeling good. And I've gone in like loop-de-loops since then. It's April 22nd now. I came up with a whole plan for what I wanted to do for developmental edits. And it seems like such a good plan. I've used the plan, left it, done other stuff, come back to the plan like a couple times so far. The thing I didn't expect is that it's just so easy to get lost in the sauce. The first quarter of my book was honestly pretty good. But as I was reading through it, I was like, well, what if instead of this thing happening because of this reason, I had it happening because of this reason? Which would mean that then it can't happen until like a bunch of chapters later than I had it happening. And so I need to like delete all of the stuff about it from the chapters where I had it before. And instead it's like, well, why can't it just happen that way? Is there actually a reason it shouldn't happen? No. Like we could leave it and it could be absolutely fine. So like, what are we doing? I'm driving myself crazy. That's what I'm doing. So that's kind of like where I've been for the past couple of days, trying to restructure things that I don't think even need to be restructured because it was just like a random passing thought that I had of like, oh, but what if this was the reason? So let's change all of this stuff. And then, 4 days of work going by and being like, I think it was fine. I think it was actually fine. Oh boy. It's also April vacation. So we're in the middle day of that. And so the 5-year-old and 7-year-old are home, and we're in a cold snap. I'm in Massachusetts. We had all these 60s days, and now we're in the 40s and 50s. And so we're all just losing our minds a little bit. We're all losing our minds. And also, my car, the handle broke on one of the doors of my car. And so I dropped off my car at the shop today, and I was like, here's the situation. I'm hoping you can replace the inner mechanism on the car because that's the problem. And they're like, I don't know. I think we should just order you a new handle that's going to cost $300. And what's that going to do? It's not the handle. I just did that. Anyways, so it's one of those days. That's where we're at. But this vlog isn't going to stop until I feel good. Kind of hope it's a short vlog. Wouldn't that be great? It's going to stop when I feel like I've made significant positive progress towards making actual changes that should happen, because there are changes that should happen. I should mention that this is the first novel. I've written a lot of books, but not all the way through for various reasons. So this is the first time I've had a full draft where I'm like, I think this is great, and I'm absolutely committed to sticking with it and figuring out everything that needs to happen so that I can hit publish. So I've never quite been at this stage. And it's not fun. It's not fun. The worst part of any writing project I've ever done. So that's where we're at. April 27th. Things are looking up. Things are looking up. Isn't it funny how you forget everything you've ever done sometimes? I had previously been like, I've actually never been at this stage before, which is not true. I've never felt this positively about a full first draft before. But I have done developmental revisions before, and I just, like, blacked out on that, I don't know. I was actually so this is because I was watching a Katie Wismer vlog, and she was like, "Isn't it funny how you just forget all the time that you've done this before and that you've done these different stages?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, actually, yeah, because I literally have done developmental revisions, and I came up with a system that worked pretty well for what I wanted to do. I just ended up deciding I didn't want to do that project because it was contemporary shifter romance instead of what I want to do now, which is like this rom-com romantasy idea. So I've been here. What the? So, anyways, I remembered that. And because I remembered, I went back to the tool, the template that I was using to go through my book and actually take notes and be like, here's pros, here's cons about each chapter. Here's what I had the chapter being, and here's what I think I need to change about the chapter. One of the things that I'm trying to do and have been trying to focus on for the last like year and a half, something like that, is really like leaning into my brain works in this way. I don't need to fight it. I don't need to be like, what if it worked in this other way? Wouldn't that be better? I can just accept this is the way my brain works. Let's, give it what it wants. And what my brain wants is templates. I like templates. I like breaking things down by beats. I like to be able to see the different components of the story, and then I can step back from it without changing the document. That was my problem, was changing the document. The other thing that my brain really does well with is I can't lock myself into one system and be like, here's what I do. I have to always be pivoting, always be looking at things from a slightly different angle, doing like looking at the story all the way through from this angle, using this sort of template, and then being like, but there's something I'm not quite getting about that. What if I look at it from like this angle and go through it all? Okay, here's something I was missing. So that's kind of the situation. A lot of the things that I do that end up being so helpful are these things that are like, it's super repetitive. Why would you do this so many times? And I don't know, but my brain wants to do that so that I can find out what the heck I was missing the first or second or third time that I did it. So, what that means specifically for this project is that I started going through my first draft and using a modified version of that template that I had come up with like a year ago. So, what I've been doing is I've been writing out here's like a summary of what actually happens in this chapter, in the first draft, very briefly, just a couple sentences, being like, oh, this is a chapter where blah happens. Then I'm going through and I'm like, here's specifically some bullet points of things that I really liked about this chapter that I definitely want to stay in this situation. Here are the things that I definitely want to take out. Here are the things that need to be clarified. I don't know how much of this information I want to share. Like, at this point, what do I want readers to believe about this backstory? That sort of thing. And then a section also for here are things that I definitely want to add in to this scene that I know. And then a summary of, so here's how I think this chapter should go. Blah, 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 blah. Like very short, as brief as I can do it, just a couple sentences. Because then I can kind of see so much easier. Here's the snapshot of what it was. Here's what I want to do. And here's what it should be. And then I can be more objective. I don't know. So anyways, That's been going well. I did that for the first sequence, which had been a prologue in 8 chapters, and now it seems like it should be a prologue in 11 chapters, which I'm not going to freak out about. This is crazy, but we're going to move past that for now. So today what I want to be doing is the same thing, reading through the first draft for the second sequence, which I believe was like 10 chapters originally, so yeah, and making all of those notes. And then I also, this is looking at it from a slightly different angle, I made a different template that I'll just put on the screen because it's kind of hard to explain. But I want to be able to see what are the two characters' story goals, because I always want to keep in mind this is what they're trying to do. So does everything they're trying to do actually make sense with what they're trying to do? The thing that had been missing is I need to be able to see what are the actions that the characters are taking to achieve these goals, and what are some of the setbacks, what's some of the progress, because that had just been missing, and I've been finding that really helpful to figure things out. What's at the top of my mind is that I want to come into this with the idea of like, I thought about this a lot before I even wrote it, so let's begin from a place of, is there a way to make it work the way that it is, rather than what if we do this? What if we do that? What if I change all of these things? What if I keep it the way it is and think about how the delivery might change? So that's sort of the idea that I'm approaching this with, because I do want to come up with a process that is, reliable and works, so that every time I'm at this stage for a book, I'm not just like swimming through the mud. It's April 29th. So things have been going on an upward trajectory. That's great. We love to see it. We're not ready to say things are good. So if I hadn't said in another clip, I have been reading through each of the 8 sequences of the book, which are generally around 9-ish chapters or so. And so I've been reading them as a reader, then stopping and taking my notes on each chapter. And the good news is that yesterday, when I was supposed to do my reading for the third sequence, it was so fun and engaging that I didn't want to stop. And so I read through the fourth sequence as well. So that's like great, right? That feels good. There's not that much I think that's going to need to change developmentally about the third and fourth sequences, which is that entire second quarter of the book. So that's fantastic. Does not mean that they are perfect, but developmentally, I don't think there's a lot that I need to do to them. And so I'm going to be reading the fifth sequence, which is the beginning of the third quarter of the book, where the third quarter is always like the worst thing ever, 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 ever. So I think there's a lot of developmental things that are going to be coming up with that. But at the moment, things are very positive. So I'm feeling like this method is working really well, and I think it's helping me be a little bit more objective, and so that's good. On the car front, the mechanic did look into the situation more, and they were like, "Oh, you're right. It is not the handle; it is the internal latch." So that's fantastic. And then yesterday, they were able to fix it. So the only downsides are that I need to get my car actually inspected in April. We're April 29th right now, and I needed to get the ball bearings replaced, which they were able to do at that place. And I apparently also need new front tires. So I have an appointment tomorrow to get those replaced. And then I need to get it inspected. So that's what's going on. It's April 30th. I did read the fifth sequence yesterday. Uh-oh. It's May 1st. And I just finished reading the 6th sequence and making my notes on it. We're going to visualize this together, okay? Because the story completely falls apart. And I knew that, and it's really too bad. But let me show you what the heck we're dealing with, and this is going to help me too. This is what we want the desire line of the story to look like. It's a straight line of characters taking actions towards a goal that is eventually achieved at the end of the book. So in Project Goblin, there's a particular thing that the female protagonist is trying to do. What she believes her goal is at the beginning, because of things that happen, the goal kind of shifts in a way that you don't see it, like you shouldn't, hopefully, be able to see it coming as you're reading it, but it makes logical sense because of, the progression of things. That is supposed to be the very straightforward line that drives the pacing and makes it very tight. And her goal has nothing to do with the romance, right? This is a romance novel. So the romance is actually the engine that's driving the whole story and making all of this character change that like inevitably brings the situation to what it is. Does this make any sense? She wants a goal that has nothing to do with the relationship between her and the male lead. But in order to achieve that goal, she needs help from the male lead. And so the relationship complicates everything, but does inevitably lead to the thing that she wants to happen. It will play out. But so, anyways, that's what's going on. You with me? Let's take a look. Project Goblin's the first book in the series that I want to be doing. And I've said this in a bunch of videos, but the main comp titles are Cressley Cole's series Immortals After Dark. And those are very action forward romance novels. And so in Truby's book, in the action genre, what he calls the action genre, he talks about the visual shape of the action plot, which is linear, right? Looks like this. It's what we're trying to do here. In action, the hero's desire line must force him into constant combat. The action hero is always fighting to get the goal. The action hero moves at top speed with relentless energy to get a specific goal. This makes the action story the most linear of all forms. This straight line creates intense narrative drive, which is a great advantage in popular storytelling. That's what we're trying to do. And that had been working really well for certain sections of the book. You can tell that the goal is driving everything and it feels very linear. It feels like the drive is there, the pressure, the speed, that's all like present. Then things fall apart. Guess where? Let's visualize this a little bit more. This just labels each of the 8 sequences as a way of breaking down the structure of the story. So if you want to think in quarters, then you've got like, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and then the final quarter, right? So each quarter of the book is 2 sequences. Here, at the end of the first sequence, we have this is the inciting event of the book. We're talking this out. This is going to help. This hopefully is going to help. So characters start off. We meet them here at the beginning of the book. There's a hook, makes you want to read the book. They start off having an initial problem that they're trying to fix, right? And the things that they do to try to fix that problem, blah, 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 it leads to them meeting each other and hating each other. And then the inciting event plays out. The inciting event is the arrival of this magical artifact that the female protagonist has to make a life-changing choice about what to do with this artifact. That's the bare bones of it. During the second sequence, she knows what she wants to do. The debate is, how does she do it? And it turns out that inevitably the only way she can achieve the thing she wants to do about this magical artifact is she needs to get help from the male love interest, right? So this is the door of no return, or the break into 2. This is where we have the adhesion thrust. The decision is made that he will help her. There's some convincing shenanigan things that happen in sequence 2. But by this point, they are locked together. The goal of the story is set. Readers know, okay, they're working together, and he has committed to helping her do this thing that she's trying to do about this magical artifact. So that's all good, right? Like that's pretty linear. No problems there. I like it. During the third sequence, they need to travel to get to where they believe they need to be for doing the next part of the goal that's going to inevitably do this. This is like really hard to keep vague. When they get here, raising of the stakes, there's a plot twist because she thought when they got to this point, a certain thing would be able to happen, and it turns out that that's not going to happen. Now she needs to figure out what is the thing that she can do then. And there's one option that is brought up, and it's the only option that seems to be possible. And so during the fourth sequence, she is attempting to do that option, and it's very difficult. And then at the midpoint, there's another plot twist, reversal thing. What she thought initially she could do to achieve this goal, here she learns no. So her goal twists. It's still to do with the magical artifact, kind of, or her motivation for why she wanted to do the thing with the artifact. But now she has a new story goal, but it's not a new story goal. It is the same goal. It just she's realized it has to be a different thing in order to get what she actually wanted initially. You're still following, right? This twist requires a whole new game plan. When we get into this fifth and sixth sequence, it's supposed to be, okay, so the new game plan means doing now this and this and this so that you can then achieve that. But instead of this straight line, what we've got going on, the black marker stopped working. We have to use pink now. This is frustrating. But so anyways, instead of this nice straight, like focused line of like, here we go, we're going towards the goal, and it's things are increasing and getting, it's like the stakes are up, the speed is up, the pressure's up, it's all harder than ever. But instead of that, we've got kind of like, oh, we have to like travel back the way that we came during the third sequence, and okay, learning some stuff, kind of vague. The stakes go up here, but it was like all really muddy to get there, and then it just things continue being very muddy, and there's things that people are doing and it's not explained, and the world building totally falls apart, and then this happens, and that's really good. Everything falls apart in the worst possible way at the end of the sixth sequence, which is like the, what do you call, like the black moment, the 75% mark, you know, that just like things totally fall apart. Everything between them in particular is like completely, there's no possible way it can work, right? Absolutely not. It'll never work. Of course, it has to work, but this is where we're at right now. And that's actually really strong. I think that's really good. It's set up very badly. And then from my memory, what I remember of the seventh sequence, it's like, a little bit wishy-washy, but it's definitely not as bad. And then once we get here, it's like, okay, and straight line, and that's good. So that's kind of like what we're working with. So what I need to do is get rid of all of this craziness stuff and figure out, how do I keep it linear? How do I ramp everything up? And I know some of the problems that are going on, like the primary opponent in this story, the like big bad guy, that there needs to be a final showdown. They're not fleshed out. There's definitely a way to do that well. And I just like, it was too many pieces at the time before writing the first draft where I was like, I know it's a problem. I know it's going to be a problem, but I need to just write the story the way that I have it in my head right now, and then I can see the problem. And like, here's the problem. Okay, there it is. At this point, like, the big bad guy would be doing a bunch of stuff, right? That's part of what makes it ramped up tension. We need to fix the primary opponent for sure. We need a better grounding of the actual world building, because there's a lot of opportunities here to deliver on the promise of a really fun world and setting that's very Celtic myth inspired. And we see a lot of the promise of that paid off here in the 7th and 8th sequences, and it's completely absent here, and we could really use that. It would help a lot. And there's a lot of world building things that I kind of didn't decide on in this area that we knew where we were, right? The world building made a lot of sense and it was fun. It was like, okay, this is exciting. And then it's just like, where are we? I don't know. And then it's like, oh, we ended up here. That's nice. What happened? In a slightly funny twist, I feel like the romance beats between them in this section are actually like, they're not strong, but they're definitely not the problem. It is actually the plot that's the problem. So anyways, there's most of the things that happen in both of these sequences, which is what, like, I don't know, nearly 20 chapters, are probably going to get cut. And it's not as crazy as that sounds because those chapters were severely underwritten because I kind of knew that they were not going well. So it's probably something like 15 to 20,000 words, which isn't super crazy. And when I first started doing this developmental revision, I made a developmental edit letter for myself, and I did use Ellen Brock's advice of making a list of, here's a column of things I love about the story, things I hate about the story, things I'm indifferent about, and things that got lost. And almost all of the things that I put in that category for things that I hate about the story happen here. So big surprise. And we're going to just have a lot of freedom to be found after I delete all of that stuff. Just be like, okay, how do I do something that I like about it? And I have an idea of where to start for that. And it's Celtic mythology. One of the things that I find the most exciting and creatively interesting about this very large universe that I'm creating, that this book is like, it's the first book set in that world, and it's meant to be a place that I can create lots of stories in many different locations, and each location is inspired by different things. So this particular story centers on a world, a plane that is based on Celtic mythology, or largely inspired by. The second book is based on a plane that is largely inspired by Greek mythology, right? So like there's so much world. And it's both a strength and a weakness. And right now it's the weakness because I've developed the world where the story starts pretty well. And then where the story ends up, this Celtic myth inspired place, is just kind of like floating in nothingness. It's not grounded. I don't have enough of it fleshed out. And that's what's causing all of these problems, because that's where all of this stuff is headed towards. What I'd really like to do is, first of all, just get a lot more familiar with some of the primary components of Celtic mythology. And I'm not trying to make it recognizable to people who are like, I love Celtic mythology, I'm super smart and know a lot of stuff about this. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm marketing towards those people. I'm using it as flavor to make a little bit of a twist on an idea that I think is fun and interesting. It's a very popular thing in romance to take a fairy tale and reskin it and sort of retell the fairy tale because it's accessible and people like that, and you get to see these different versions of fairy tales. I want to use that kind of idea, not enough to market it that way, but I want to reskin certain characters or stories from, in this case, Celtic mythology. And I have an idea of one particular story that I kind of want to model after the bad guy, and he doesn't exist in this way in what I have right now. But I think I want to learn more about that particular story, as well as there's another story that I kind of am playing with the idea of reskinning my female lead a little bit more based on that. And it just like is a way of getting myself more grounded in this mythic sort of element that I want this world to have. Anyways, so before I actually like fix this draft, the world building has to come together. And as I am doing the world building, I'm keeping in mind that fleshing out this Celtic inspired world has to work with, there are 2 other books that I have already that I want to set in this world in the future at some point. And so those need to work with whatever I come up with for this story. And I'm going to get off the camera now. Well. It's May 7th. Nope. The 6th. Okay, so here's what's going on. It's spring and it's beautiful and there are garden things that I want to do, and this is like the time to do it. So I have not been writing for the last 2 days, which is crazy. I have literally been outside working on the garden all of Monday and Tuesday of this week. It's Wednesday now. And it's really starting to get to me in terms of yikes. Like, I need to lock in and do my work when I'm supposed to be doing my work while the kids are in school. And it's good in a way because that garden stuff had to get done. And this is the time to do this garden stuff. But there's literally no balance. And it's really frustrating me. I cannot get myself to lock into what I'm trying to be doing with writing. And a little bit of an assessment there has uncovered probably the reasons. I do really well with being able to like make visual progress on my Kanban board. And at the moment, all of the things on my Kanban board, I'm not doing those anymore. That was back when I had made my developmental edit letter to myself and I was like, I'm going to make a bunch of passes. And now I'm like, that's a fun idea. That's nice. But that's something that that really would have made more sense during the like looking at the outline stage and then revising the outline to have all of this stuff. And right now, I think really where I'm at is just like it's the world building, it's the backstory deepening, because the entire first half of the book I think is actually pretty good. And I can make those developmental edit changes pretty easily. And that's like half the book, just like, okay, set. But the second half of the book, where we're supposed to have all the emotional payoff, I know what I want the feeling and the payoff to be, but all of the steps to get there and all of the actions that happen and all of the opponent's actions and all of the here's why you're supposed to feel this way because we're setting up that this, and this were going on in the backstories. All of that swirly whirly. And so I had started working on the world building, and that has very little bit of starting to work on the world building, and that has helped immensely. That is definitely where I need to focus my attention. But I can't quite focus yet because of all the garden stuff that's just like banging away on my brain. So I'm trying but I know that part of the motivation that I've lost to work on the writing is because I haven't like how do you make progress markers for world building? It's so vast that it's just like I don't know. It's difficult to feel like you're making progress on it when there's so much to do. And anyways, so that's part of the problem. So I need to do a little bit of brainstorming of how I can get myself to feel like I'm making progress on it so that I can actually start working on it. And the other thing is that I've been making my notes chapter by chapter on the first draft. And I just like haven't been able to get myself to lock in and do the last 2 sequences, the notes for those chapters. And I don't know why, but I will feel so much better, and that will feel like such a big check mark ticked off if I can just do that. It's only like 12 chapters left in the book or something to make notes on. It's not crazy. So today I'm going to try to get a little bit of focus back by doing something that never works, but we're going to try it and see if it works. I am going to try to do one time block, 25 minutes, working on my notes for the seventh sequence. And I'm going to try to do as much of the notes that need to happen as I can in 25 minutes. And then I'm stopping. And I'm going to go do some garden stuff that I need to be doing for 25 minutes. And then I'm stopping and coming back and doing 25 minutes of notes on sequence 7, just like back and forth. And that never ever works. It never works because I cannot walk away from things before they're done. I am super obsessive. But we're going to see if it works today because I don't know how else to try to give my brain what it wants working on the garden and also make progress. So here we go. It's May 11th. Things are going pretty well. I think in the last clip I was like, I'm going to try this thing. It never works. It did actually work on that day, so that's great. I was able to do some of the gardening stuff as well as all of the notes for the 7th and 8th sequences. So I have all of my notes done for the chapter by chapter thing. And I was able to take the summaries of each of the chapters from those notes and sort of put it into its own paragraph outline style, which is really helpful to just see the condensed version of here's what I did in each of these chapters. And that's similar to how I first outlined the book, but between outlining the book in that format, writing it in the long prose form, and then summarizing what I wrote, there are differences in those. So it's nice to see the version of here's what I literally actually wrote. That's like a 10,000 word document. So that's pretty good. And so I have been working on the world building stuff. I'm using Canva to do my world building and sort of make different layouts for different pages and be like, here's this royal line. And here's like a little picture inspiration of each of the people in this royal family lineage that's based on this character from Irish mythology. So that actually is really helpful for me because I'm using these figures from mythology as the inspiration, but there's a twist to them. So, for an example of that, dragons, the dragon world is actually going to be largely Arthurian mythology inspired. And so there's this one character that's sort of skinned off of Arthur, but it's not Arthur with his typical mythology history. It's like, what if this character was based on Arthur in a dragon shifter world that has this sort of like history going on? And what if the Lancelot skinned character was actually his half brother? And what if he's the love interest in Project Goblin? And that sort of world building has been really helpful. So I've been doing that, and I've also been sort of brain dumping. I have a lot of ideas for this location I want to be based off of this sort of mythology. And where does that bring my brain to, And just sort of really building out not just the world as it pertains to this particular book, but anything that I come up with. So I had quite a few ideas that are really exciting for other parts of the universe. So it's been going well. It's been going well. We're at the tail end of the garden stuff that's like it feels very imminent that it needs to happen, which it essentially is at this point just there are some strawberry plants that I want to transplant to other places in the garden, and they're right on the verge of flowering. And I don't want to be transplanting them as they flower. I want them to have a couple of days to settle into their new location. So it's not as simple as, okay, then like dig it up and put it in where it's going. It's prepare the place they're going to be going because it's not ready to be planted yet. Then dig it up, then transplant it, then take apart the raised beds that are sort of in the way of where the rest of the strawberries need to go, prepare that location in ground instead of in a raised bed. And so it's like, okay, some steps. So today I'm hopefully going to be taking care of that so that I can get back to I write when the kids are at school. I don't do all these elaborate garden plans. I've actually been getting really excited about doing some more drafting in book 3, which is, it's a funny thing to be doing. But I was finding that when I was trying to really concentrate on let's spend 6 time blocks in a day just world building, that felt like way too much. And it was kind of making it hard for me to start because I was like, oh boy, this is like 3 hours of just like world building, 2 hours of world building a day. Like, that's a lot. It felt a lot more manageable when I was like, okay, do a little bit of world building, work on drafting a chapter from the book you already outlined, the book 3, then do a little more world building. So that's the strategy. It's a beautiful day. And here we go. It's May 12th. It's a beautiful day, and I'm not outside gardening, and I love that. I love that. So here we are doing what I want to do for my career when I'm supposed to. Love to see it. I would say things are going fairly well. Fairly well. We're not ready to end the vlog. I don't want to end the vlog until I feel like I'm at the stage where I'm actually going to be again working on the manuscript. So I wrote the 3rd chapter of the 3rd book, which there's 2 prologues, so it's actually like 5 chapters into the book. Today I'm going to write chapter 4 in that project, as well as work on world building. So you probably would have seen from one of the clips, but I figured out how I wanted to structure wrapping my mind around world building on my Kanban board to help with momentum. So I decided to do it in these. Each square is 1 time block, 25 minutes. So if I had a full day of writing, I would be doing 6 time blocks of work, which would be like an entire sticky note if I was only doing world building. But I felt like that was going to be a good way to track it and give me a little push because I want to complete these. So I want to be filling in those boxes. And that had been really missing. So this is like a motivating piece. I sort of initially started off thinking that reading the Irish mythology book that I'm reading right now wouldn't be counted as world building time because I'm reading. But in reality, it really should be because when I have like free time for free reading, it's not mythology I want to read, it's romance novels I want to read. So that was kind of making me take a break from reading the mythology for a couple days. But once it turns out I could actually color in some of those squares every time I'm reading the mythology book, suddenly it's like, let's read some mythology, which is what I need. So I decided that it does count, and that's great. So today the plan is to write chapter 4, read the next story in the mythology book, and then spend 2 time blocks actively world building, actively looking at pieces of the story. I'm getting close to the end of the book. This is what I have left. So the next story is the intoxication of the Ulaid. Forgive me, I don't know. And that one's kind of a chunkier story. So I'm going to try to read that today. And I think in my Q2 goals, I had a certain amount of time blocks that I wanted to make sure that I spent on working on the 2nd draft of Project Goblin. And I've almost hit that amount of time blocks. And we're in the 7th out of 13 weeks of the quarter. So I am feeling like it's okay, if I branch off, diverge, do some work on one of the other books in the series. It's not like it doesn't all cohesively help the main goal, which is publishing this first 5-book series. So it's okay. Even though I do still think that by the end of the second quarter, I would really like to. There'll be some chapters that need to be rewritten, and then other things that just need to be tweaked developmentally in the first and second sequences of Project Goblin, which is about 21 chapters. And so that feels really crazy to not be like working on something that there's going to be 21 chapters of work that I want to be doing. But I think it'll be fine. It'll be okay. So, but anyways, this vlog won't end until I'm starting to work on those chapters. And I don't think that I want to do that until I'm done with drafting the chapters for book 3 that I had wanted to do this quarter, which was the first 18 chapters or so. So we've got a little ways left to go, but if I keep being able to do one chapter every day as well as some of the world building, I'll be done with the first sequence by this Friday, which is 4 days of work, including today. And then it's just like, I don't know, another week and a half before I would be done with those chapters. So technically I could probably start working on the chapters I'm trying to do from Project Goblin in 2 to 3 weeks, something like that, which seems fine. It's May 14th. Things are going well. I finished reading Early Irish Myths and Sagas. It was really good. I'm going to switch from the Irish mythology and do a little bit of Irish fairy tales and folklore. And I'm so happy I'm drafting again. I'm drafting more of book 3, which is such a funny thing to do. But I'm really excited about it. It's been really fun to write. It's felt really easy to write. And it's really fun to read back. So like I said, I don't want to like put too much out there about what this book is about, but it's so fun and I just want to share a little bit about it. So we know from a past clip that I did that book 3 is based on sort of a riff on the rejected mate trope with this like fated mates between two shifters. Project Goblin, the female lead is Selena, and she is the captain of this sort of spacefaring crew. And her best friend slash like found family brother is Sphere. And book 3 is Sphere's book. So so he's a shifter, and the female lead is also a shifter. And there's a lot of ways that you can do shifters. So in this series, what I'm doing is you have the male lead and the female lead who have their own issues. And then they also are sharing a soul with an anima who has their own issues. And so it's just like a lot of fun stuff to play with. But the other fun thing is that the female lead is an Aries, and her best friend slash her found family brother sort of character is a Leo. And so he's just like also very dramatic, lots of fire energy. So it's just like super fun to have two really fire type personalities who just like totally bounce off of each other and create these crazy situations because they're just like toxically positive to each other. It's very Tulio and Miguel from The Road to El Dorado. And then you have the sort of like silent, brooding, archetypal romance male lead, which is Sphere. And he's just like, what is going on? What is this? And it's just really fun. It's almost 2 o'clock on May 16th, and I've already done all the work that I needed to do today, except that I wanted to finish writing chapter 7 of project. We're calling it book 3. And that's the last chapter of sequence 1. It's a Friday, and I'm not supposed to work on the weekends. So it would be great to just finish this chapter. The one and only problem is that I super don't feel like it at all. But I did choose that I want to be a writer. And so, and I have the time. it's not like I didn't just take a big long break from doing my work. So, my son is home with a fever. He's doing great. He's zipping around the entire house. He just happens to also have a fever. And anyways, jam-packed weekend coming up. I will be so happy when this chapter is done. It will feel so good. So here I go. I don't want to do it. It is May 18th, Monday. My son has a fever still. He's fine. Uh, Luckily, I don't know. My kids just always have fevers. I don't know what to tell you. I do feel like the kids just live their lives in a constant state of having fevers every 2 weeks. So, anyways, that's going on. He's home from school. And we have a dilemma because remember how I was like, oh, I like finished the last of the garden stuff that needs to happen like now. There's more new garden stuff that has to happen like now. And it's supposed to be really hot where we've got a string of days that are supposed to be like up to 90. And you could, do intensive garden labor in 90-degree heat. And I know people do, but like I don't want to. So that means that to do the imminent stuff, I should do it earlier in the day, like when I'm not supposed to be doing it to beat the heat. So decisions will need to be made. But regardless, the plan as we know it. By May 26th, I want to be done writing these 7 chapters of book 3. So I really want to do that. And I am really, really liking doing all of the reading. I think I'm like 160 pages or so into the folklore, Irish folklore book. That's really good. I think I'm like finally at the stage where I'm starting to have these ideas of in this Fae, Irish Celtic mythology inspired world, I want to be able to have like a character who's like this, and there's a relationship dynamic between this kind of thing and this kind of thing. I think I'm kind of like finally at that stage where all of the like taking in the media has started marinating down into, and here's how I want to do this, and here's how I want to do this. But it's like at the very baby beginning stages of that. So I am hoping to do like 30 pages of reading from that book every day until I'm done with that book, and also spend like 25 minutes, a time block or so, every day after the reading, kind of jotting down. And here's an idea of, how I want to, exactly what I was saying, this sort of character and this sort of thing, whatever. Because yeah, it's feeling like it's starting to come together clearer into a really fun idea. So in that sort of frame, the progress on Project Goblin has not been stalled because I am actively working on it. But in another very real feeling way, it does feel like it's stalled because I'm not working on the project. I'm reading and thinking. So, not great. But so that's how the drafting is helping with the mental frame of mind, because it's like things are marinating. I know I need to be doing this for book 1. Meanwhile, I am making literal progress on book 3. So like things are happening. So that's where we're at. We're going to try to do 45 minutes and sort of like bang out chapter 8 if we can for book 3. And then go outside and do a little bit of that like intensive garden labor stuff. What's going on is that prior to this, I did all of the work needed for getting strawberries transplanted and some like regular vegetable kitchen garden stuff set. But now my husband and I have sort of like gotten bit by the we want native plants in our yard bug. And so we have a certain section of the yard that we're re-landscaping because of this idea, and we bought some plants for it, and the landscaping hasn't been done for those plants to like go in, so but they're coming soon, so they need to be able to go in, and so here we are. Uh, so ideally, I'd be waiting until later in the day and like doing this with my husband, but it's going to be those hot days, and there's just kind of like a lot to. So, anyways, here we go. Let's start. Hooray! It's May 21st. Not a demon after all. I started doing this today. I'll do a zoom in either before or after this clip. But I'm running out of sticky notes. I gotta get some more sticky notes. Because this is all world building stuff, and there's a lot more. Things are going well. Things are going well. The big news is that I'm almost done drafting the chapters for book 3, which is really exciting, and it's been really, really fun, and it's been really helping me feel accomplished and like I'm doing things, because real hard to track progress in huge amounts of world building. So this is fantastic. I have actually 3 chapters left to write. So today's Thursday. I should be able to write a chapter today, 1 tomorrow, and then 1 on Monday. So really, really close. And I love the way it's coming together. It has been so fun to write. It's been so interesting. And again, I just like really am doubling down on feeling like I'm making the right decision, drafting multiple books before fully finishing one of them, because I've learned enough about my drafting process at this time and outlining process that I feel like I've merged quite a lot of steps I used to have into one. The first draft of book 3 had been just kind of like a very brief summary of each chapter in the first 16 chapters of the book. And I've actually changed quite a bit of the summary of those as I go and sort of make decisions on the fly that feel more in character as I'm learning the characters. And so it's been really, really easy, though, knowing where the end point is and what I thought was going to happen. But then if I make this one change, then that means that I need to do these little changes all the way down the line. But I'm still ending like here at this point. So it's just like so easy. I don't know. It's nice. As far as Project Goblin, so I think it's going to be a longer process than I thought / hoped before making a lot of progress. But that is not to, like, I'm feeling good about it. I know that it's the right call to be going this slowly, to be really feeling out the vibes and the particulars of what I want to be doing. And so I know that this is the correct way for me at the moment to be doing this. And so there's a lot of comfort in that. Having my world building time block squares to fill in has been really helpful. That does help me feel like I'm making progress. That helps me want to be doing it, which had been a problem earlier in the vlog. This, I think, is going to help even more, because while I do want to be doing the world building to fill in these squares, and that is motivating, the less motivating, more sort of stumbling block that I had been finding was that there's just so much world building that I want to be doing, and depending on the day, I might not be thinking very clearly enough to be like, let me sift through what I know in my brain has to be going on, like what should I world build today? Instead, just like on a day where I have a lot of clarity, like today, making all of the things that I can think of at the moment that I think would really help. This is all on the Fae homeworld, and we haven't gotten to the Dragon homeworld yet. We will get there. But the Fae homeworld feels like I sort of sketched freehand a picture of what I might want it to be. And what I need to know now is I need to have like a clear visual map, right? So so at the moment I'm making these decisions, feeling out where I want like the lines to be, turning the freehand sketch into like a printable coloring page. I'm a mom. Can you tell? Um, so, and then once I have the boundaries of like, this thing is this and is not these things, then that's the outline. And then I can go fill in. And in relation to the story that I'm doing, within these boundaries now, here's how I'm gonna color it in. And so, does that make sense? So this is helping a lot. Yesterday actually was a really big breakthrough because I just sat down and I was thinking through how I wanted the differences between Fae, the good folk, and Tuatha, the Tuatha De Danann. I do need to look up how to say that properly. Because when I first wrote Project Goblin, it was all vague. I knew that there was going to be Fae and there was going to be some other branch of magic of other beings that I thought was going to be encompassed by the Tuatha De Danann, who I thought might be like maybe they were part of what I would consider the good folk of the area. And I was playing with like, what kinds of good folk would I want in this world? And it was all very vague. It was all very hard to like hold on to. And at the time, I was like, I gotta move on. So, and we're doubling back now. And I decided exactly what falls under the branch term of the good folk. And so this is where reading the Irish mythology and the Irish folklore has been really helpful. I can feel that there are some really fun things that are sort of marinating in the back of my mind with these decisions. So that was really great to make that clarity, get that clarity yesterday. This vlog still won't end until I am starting to work on the second draft, writing the chapters. But I keep changing what I think that means. And so at the moment, what I think it means is that I'm not going to finish all of this stuff before starting to work on the chapters. Like I said, the first entire half of the book really doesn't need this stuff to be figured out to start working on it. And I have my notes to look back over on things that I wanted to change. So I really could be, even now, working on the first half of the book. The reason I'm not is because I'm using that sort of drafting mental energy space to be doing book 3. That just had my attention. I wanted a little bit more of a break from working on this project after starting to write it and then realizing actually I'm scrapping what I came up with because I'm going to keep the thing. And so anyways, I needed a little bit of a break from that. So at the moment, book 3 is taking up the drafting energy. But like I said, I only have 3 chapters left to write. And then I'll be draftless, and so that just turns into a really good time to be starting to work on the first half of book 1. So that's kind of the plan at the moment. All of this world building, and there's going to be a lot more again post-its that go up there, all of this world building is going to be really good to work on during the summer because I have 2 kids, right, and they're going to be out of school in the next few weeks. And also, what I remember from last year is that during the summer, I really struggled to think well in the heat. And so I don't want to have... It's a toss-up between saying I don't want to have lofty goals and also I don't want to have seemingly perfectly achievable goals, which are kind of the same thing, I guess. So I want to kind of keep the bar low in terms of what I'm expecting to be able to do. And obviously, hopefully, you know, the stars align and it all goes way better than I ever could have dreamed. And I do everything that I plan to do as well as more. But
somewhat realistically, it's unlikely that I will get that much done during the summer because also it looks like it's pretty possible that my mom is going to come stay with us for at least 2 months out of the summer, which would be great. She lives a couple hours away, and it's actually really hard to sort of connect. And so, anyways, this would be great. But it also means that as far as like energy, time spent towards writing, I gotta keep my expectations low. So, so with that in mind, I think I'll probably be working on this stuff all through the summer. So, real quick summary: by the end of Q2, which at the moment we've got, it's the 8th week of the quarter, so about 5 weeks left of the second quarter. I'm gonna put it on the screen because this is just like a word salad, right? But I'm gonna finish the first 2 sequences of draft 1 of book 3. I'm gonna finish the first sequence of draft 2 of book 1. And I'm also gonna do an unspecified amount of world building. However much I can. Other things that are going on at the garden is really poppin'. In fact, I have to go out there today or tomorrow and set up my pea trellises because it's that time. They want to climb. I did such a good job setting up my tomato trellises because I was like, oh, I need to have the trellis ready for the tomatoes for sure. Like those are the babies. That's what I'm babying, and so it needs to be ready. Tomatoes aren't in the ground. They're not going in for a little while, with a caveat. But I have beans and peas that are going to need trellises. So anyways, we're going to be working on that. And today, we're actually going to clear the greenhouse a bit because there was a little bit of a lupin problem. So I didn't know that when you dry seed pods, specifically in this case, let's say lupin seed pods, that there's a certain point in the drying process that the pods crack open and the seeds fall out. I wasn't thinking about that when I hung it up to dry in like September last year or whatever it was. So I was just like, ooh, like I could save some lupin seeds and maybe do a couple more plants. Well, the entire greenhouse is just full of lupin baby seedlings. So, and I do want to save some, so I'm going to transfer a few to a nursery bed and then clear the rest of it because there are some greenhouse tomatoes that I want to plant. So. And I also need to plant the greenhouse beans. So.
It's Tuesday, May 26th, and I am on a break. So the big news is that a couple days ago, I finished writing the chapters for book 3 that I had a goal that I wanted to write. So the entire first quarter of book 3 is written, which is it feels great. It feels really good. And I know that's so silly. Like I haven't written book 2 yet. And I haven't even done a second draft of book 1 yet. But anyways, so it all feels really good. And let's just like for a second talk about the quality, how I feel about the quality of writing between what I did for book 3 versus what I did for book one. For book one, I have vlogs on it, right? Where the idea was I wanted to write it as fast as I could, and I had a really detailed outline to go off of. So I was really trying to just like get on the page what the story was. And I was not worried about what does it sound like, how good is it, all this stuff, voice, all this stuff. And that experience had some ups and downs. Definitely what I realized was I don't wanna work at that pace for sure, in future projects. So that's how that experience was, and I'm glad that I did it that way, and I learned a lot by doing it that way. One of those things being that in the future when I am drafting, I wanna have a lot less pressure on how fast I am trying to write. So I took that lesson forward when I was doing book 3, and instead of having a goal of writing 3 chapters every day that was a writing day, I had the goal of writing 1 chapter every day that was a writing day. And that typically left, like, some time in my writing set aside writing time to do other things, like working on the world building for book 1. And that worked way better. That was actually really fun. I ended up having a much easier time just sort of starting because it was so much less pressure of just like, "Oh, it's literally only 1 chapter." And that's all I have to draft. And I think that's just kind of the amount of drafting brain energy that I tend to have. And the chapters would range from around 500 words, which was actually pretty short, to like 1,800 words. So I wasn't doing a word count. It was literally just the chapter and really sinking into it and doing what felt good. So and I really think that it was such a pleasurable way to write. It really, really was, and I felt like that kind of let me it kinda gave me permission in my brain to sort of take a little bit longer and think about where I wanted things to turn, because the other thing different, was that I was not working off of a super detailed outline for this book. The way that book 3 has gone, I have an outline of the whole story, but it's quite broad. There are a lot of things that I know I want to happen, and the specific way that I want those to happen, I am not sure about. And I have a certain version on my outline right now that I am not in any way tied to. And I actually have some qualms about anyways, we don't have to get into it, but suffice to say, the second half of book 3 has a lot of question marks of how I wanna tie things together, particularly the ending, so we'll see. But I feel really strongly about the first quarter, and so what I had done is I wrote, like, a pretty brief, honestly, couple sentences, paragraph summary for each of the chapters, and then as I was writing, I was letting myself really sink into the story and make different decisions on the page, not hugely, but enough, significantly, so that it was not following the outline necessarily. In terms of like, "Oh, I thought this situation would happen," then in the moment I was like, "No, I think it would be actually this situation that still achieves the desired, like, here's where they end at the end of that scene," and, the dynamic between them. So there's that. Whereas with book 1, I really was following it like, I wrote that I was gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, because I'm just trying to get it out there, and then we'll see what happens, and I will be cutting a lot of entire 3rd quarter of book 1, but so and that's fine. So, yeah, different strategies, different things, and, yeah, I'm just really happy with the way it came together. It's 16 chapters total, and it took 16 writing days to do, which I feel like is actually really it just seems like that's really fast, isn't it? I mean, 16 days to write 16 chapters. I don't know. I think that's great. And my chapters seems like I'm tending toward books that have around 65, well, around 60 to 70 chapters seems about how things sort of play out, and the chapters being pretty brief. Supposedly. I haven't written a second draft yet. But if that was the case, then it would be like, around 2.5 months of writing days, which is really more closer to what, 3.5 months total in in real lifetime, something like that.
maybe closer to 4. How do weekends work? I don't know. Which feels good because again, like I'm thinking the quality of what I've done. I don't think structurally I'm going to need to change hardly anything from that. And so I could be eating those words, but and I feel like that really allowed me to get a really good grasp on the tone of the characters, sort of the internal where they're starting, that starting place feels so solid. So I'll stop talking about it now, but it was a really good experience, and I think that the word count total came to something like 18,000 words, something like that for the first quarter of the book. So, I don't know, that feels good. We are getting to the end of this vlog. It is close, it is close. I am on a week of a break now, though. So, you'll just get some B-roll, but yeah, what's going on is we're in the last week of May. This is basically the time where we have our typical last frost of the season. So this is around the time that you would be planting out all of your warm weather crops and all that stuff. So there's a lot of garden stuff that I need to do, and it's been really banging away on the brain. So the idea is I just finished my big goal, right, of write a quarter of book 3. I finished that over the weekend, and I'm trying to give myself, like I'm trying to get myself to trust myself more. That if I say I'm gonna give myself a break after I finish a major project, I actually go through and do it, even if in the moment I'm like, "I don't know, maybe I should just keep going and do some more stuff." But I know that it is good to have that break, and so I'm just like, "Okay, I'm following through. This is my week of break from writing." And I'm gonna use that time then instead to do the writing, and I'm gonna use that time instead to do the structural work in the garden, because there's a bunch of trellises I need to make, all this stuff, and then there will be warm crops to plant. So I'm gonna just use this week to detox from writing, see if I can read a couple fun romantasies. I don't know. We'll come back to that. Blah, 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 blah. We will circle back to that and just get all of the garden projects out of my brain so that when I come back, I can just focus and be like, here we go. Okay. And Noah's are going to draft 2 of my actual first book. So that's the plan. And then circling back to reading some romantasy. This is actually really funny because at this time when I am planning to do a break, Alyssa from Alyssa in the Books is coming out with videos of her, what she's doing on her creative break. So it's just kind of funny how that works out, but it's really nice. And so she was talking about reading books in the genre that she's reading, which she doesn't usually. And I should be reading books in a genre that I don't usually, that I believe is the genre I'm writing. So tricky part of the thing is that there are 2 comp titles. There are 2 comp authors for the series I want to do. For the more romance and tone of the book, the comp is Cressley Cole's Immortals After Dark series. And so that's like the heavy romance. It's the romance as like the spine of the story and the banter and all of that stuff. Like that is very much what I'm doing. But as far as sort of like setting and world and theme, how an author approaches theme, I definitely feel like I'm much more finding much more of a comp with Jenny Schwartz, who writes I love Jenny Schwartz. So, okay, if you haven't read her, I'll leave below some links to some of my favorite of her books. But she has this fantastic way of combining sci-fi and fantasy elements in this really unique, intriguing way. And the pacing of her stories is really like you're just going, and it's fun because you're going, but it's not she doesn't make you feel like, "Oh, it's this thing and then this thing and then this thing," like, so I don't know how else to describe that, but you're just like, "Okay, like, we are steadily moving," and I really like that, and I think she just has such a unique, great way of blending the fantasy and sci-fi elements, which is kind of what I'm doing, and she does it in a much more sci-fi with, like, flavors of fantasy, whereas I'm gonna be doing it in a fantasy with very light flavors of sci-fi.
So there's that difference. But she also like has this really fantastic way of approaching theme. Her books have a lot of depth to them, and it's just like really, I love it. And you don't see that super often in a lot of books that also have like a romance as one of the central things. So, anyways, I don't know if that actually makes sense, but yeah, so those are my comp stuff. So, it makes it harder when I'm trying to look for, like, let's say, where I would be publishing, right? Kindle Unlimited, things that are labeled as romantasy. Because I feel like it's just like Alyssa from Alyssa in the Books was saying, there's a spectrum of what romantasy means. And I feel like I'm not seeing what I'm writing on that spectrum really. So it is a little worrying. And I definitely think that there's a market for it if I could learn how to market. That I think will be the biggest thing. There's a lot sellable about what I want to do. There's a lot marketable about it, but I'm not actually really seeing it. And so when I start reading these romantasy books that are labeled romantasy and they have these huge cult followings and I try to read them and I'm like, I love that people love this. That's so fantastic. It's just not for me. It's not what I'm doing. And it's just not my thing. And so that's not good. And then also, there's just like this thing going on right now with, I think, romance in general, but also I feel like romantasy specifically, where usually the male main character is a very toxic person, right? Like if you ever met this person in real life, it would be like, holy, like stay away from me. This is nuts. And that is obviously people are liking that, people are buying that, they're reading it. And so that's great. But but I don't want to read that. It's just like I'm not interested in that. So it's actually kind of hard because if you don't have that, if the male main character actually seems like maybe they're not super toxic, then usually the female main character is this sort of really girl boss to the extreme, to the point where it's like hard to relate and connect to them because it's so extreme. And it's just like, I don't know, I have a hard time connecting to a lot of the way that popular female main characters and male main characters in romantasy genre stuff are portrayed. And so that's that makes it frustrating. So I'll give all of these romantasy books a try and then I'll pretty quickly be like, I don't know. So either I can't connect to the main characters or like I do like the main characters, but then the plot feels like paper thin, or then it's just like, oh, this is a actual plot driven story and then the romance is just like that feels kind of funny. So I don't know, I'm having a hard time finding romantasy books that I am enjoying. So I don't know what that's about. So I'm trying. I'm trying. Instead, what I've been reading a lot of is just like hockey romance, which is great. So particularly a lot of like hockey romances. Anyways, I gotta go drink my coffee and take a little bit of an inventory of what I'm trying to do today. There's so much wood that I have to cut for the things that I want to be doing that's like the main problem in my brain because there's not a good area in the basement where I'm supposed to be cutting this wood to cut wood. It is so bad. And then also it's the worst kind of cutting wood where you're taking 2x4s and ripping them to become 1x2s. I don't enjoy that kind of thing. I learned how to do it. I can do it, but I don't enjoy it. And I think there's a lot of that. So, but it will be good. It will be good. And the garden's looking really great. So let's have some coffee and figure it out. I hate filming clips on Fridays because that's when our garbage trucks go by and they just always inevitably. Anyways, they're going by. It's May 29th. It's Friday. This is technically the last day of my week off, which I think I'll take next week off too because this week literally I've just been doing garden stuff. You saw how much stuff I did. That took so long. And that's fine. It's good. I'm glad. I'm happy with how it came out. It will be fantastic. Um, but I don't feel particularly rested. So I will take off at least a couple more days next week, if not the entire week. But I actually have been doing a little bit of writing. Let me explain. So there are two things, two updates, I think. Maybe three. I think I just showed a clip of this little thing. I literally just a few minutes ago did this. I've been thinking about so I use the 8 sequence method to outline, and I just like that kind of thing works so well for my brain. And I was trying to think, how can I use that as a tool in revision to help focus what I'm doing and get more targeted on revision stuff that I want to be doing? And so I'm toying with the idea of what if I take a look at each sequence as what's the primary question that is being asked during this portion of the book, this sequence, and what is the answer to that question or partial answer that leads to another question, that would come at the climax of that sequence or like the next major story beat. And that was really fun. I think that that may be a really good framing tool for how I want to revise things. So, for instance, in the first sequence, the primary thing that is the question is what is the female main character doing in this part of the universe? And that's exactly what the male love interest, Ragnar, what he's trying to figure out. And so that works really well as a question, I think. And I think it helps give a little bit of direction because one of the things I struggled with during the writing of the first draft was how much are readers supposed to know about what's going on at any certain time? And like, what is the dispersal of information like? Because there are supposed to be a lot of things you think are going on that you later realize, oh, it made sense that I thought that, but actually it's this because I learned this other information. And that's kind of interesting. So, what does that mean then? Because I've been really playing with the idea of can I tell myself the bare bones version of the story, like girl from blah 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 is doing blah blah blah, but blah blah blah. Can I know that for each of the main characters and then totally bury it so that once you find out the truth, it's like, oh, okay, that wasn't like super complicated, but it was really fun getting there because of the dispersal of information, and that's not what I thought was going on. That's what I'm playing around with. So I like that idea of using a question to structure each sequence. So, what is she doing in the rift? And then there are 4 different things that are like possibilities of what she is doing in the rift that are implied or stated or whatever through the course of the first sequence by various characters. And then at the inciting event, which is the climax of the first sequence, then because of the events that happen in the inciting event, you learn a half answer to what is going like what she's doing in the rift. And it should be enough to be a hook to be like, wait, okay, so if that's what she's doing here, then I have more questions. Anyways, that's been fun. And I think that I'm going to continue the structuring things in this way because that does actually change a lot of the like conversation that will be going on, questions that would be asked, answers that would be given during the chapters of the first sequence between those the main characters. So that was one thing I wanted to tell you guys. And then another thing was I had a revelation about what I want the prologue to be So I had an idea of what the prologue was. I made a draft of it. It was pretty rough. There was a lot of things, a lot of pieces that didn't really connect, and I wasn't really sure what to do about that. But through the course of thinking more about how I want this Arthurian myth inspired dragon world and the characters and the twists I want to put on the characters, through doing that, I realized actually there's a different situation that I want to set up at the beginning that would still have the end result I wanted from that prologue, but it would be setting up different backstory things and characters, and it would do a much better job of setting up the whole mythic kind of feel of the book, which I want to do. And it would also lead to greater emotional payoff. So, anyways, that was another revelation I had. So I kind of sketched out what that prologue would look out, just a couple paragraphs of like vaguely this. Another revelation happened this morning when I was kind of talking through the setup of the book and that Arthurian myth changes that I had made with my husband. I was telling him some of that stuff. And as I was telling him what I had been coming up with, I was like, oh, it doesn't sound quite strong enough. So what if I tell it to him in this way, where this pivotal Arthurian thing is in the book, which I'd been kind of toying with the idea of whether I would try to do that or not. As I was telling him the updated version of the plot, I told it to him in a way as if there was a certain object that is in the first draft of the book by a different name and then was totally dropped. So I gave it a different Arthurian name. Does that make sense? But as I was saying it out loud, I was like, that actually works pretty good. And I don't know what that would mean in terms of the rules of the world, but I think it's definitely worth figuring out what that means, because I think that's a really big motivator piece for some other characters that are going to be going on. So this is good. As I've been doing all this garden stuff, mostly I've been listening to the playlists that I created for the 5 books in this first series that I'm going to be releasing. I don't know if I've mentioned this in any other vlog, but each book in the series I have made a playlist for what the vibes are of the book, and just like certain parts of the story that I know, and I listen to them all the time. It's like the only things that I listen to are like songs from Eurovision and these playlists for my books. And that just like really helps me think in the back of my mind when I'm doing other things about the books. And that really helps. There was one song on there for book 4 that I was listening to as I was doing garden stuff, and I was like, what if keep everything the same, but this piece of backstory is inserted, and that can really make it pop. And so that was really exciting. So then I was doing some brainstorming for, okay, so if I do that, then here's kind of like what this section of the book would look like, and here's how the problem happens in this part and how that happens. And so I feel like I got a lot of the ending, well, actually, a fair amount of stuff figured out for the whole of book 4. So that's fun. So I have been on a break, but have I? I have, because I haven't been spending hardly any time writing. But the other thing, I finished the Irish folktale fairy tale book, and I started a new one, Lore of the Elders or something. I don't know. But there was like a 30-page introduction. So I just read the introduction, and I'm about to start reading it when I go pick up the kids in a few minutes. So that's the update. That's the update. And goodbye. It's Monday, June 1st. And I feel like the gears are turning. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. I just dropped the kids off. And I think I'm really close to figuring out how I'm going to change things for the first sequence, and getting close enough where I could start. The new book that I'm reading, by the way, is Tales of the Elders of Ireland. And it's really fun, actually. This is my first encounter with reading anything about St. Patrick. This book is really fun. I think I just finished the first chapter of this, and it's quite dense. in the sense of it's written in that like very old style, and all the paragraphs, there's like 10 million people talking during one paragraph, and then there's no, broken up text or anything. So it's hard to read because of that. And so I have to read it out loud or I just can't hold on to anything that's happening. And it's actually really fun like that because what emerges is that the two main characters are St. Patrick and I again don't know how to pronounce this name and I apologize. Kilt, Cailte, I believe, who is an older warrior from Finn McCool's Fianna gang troop. And at this time that this story takes place, Finn is dead, the whole troop is like disbanded, everything. So he's like one of the last survivors of this really famous big group. And the way that it reads is that St. Patrick is Kilty's biggest fanboy ever. The format is basically St. Patrick asking questions about what the Fianna did in their glory days, and Kilty is just like, yes, I will tell you the tale. And then after he tells the tale of whatever the question was that St. Patrick asked, St. Patrick's like, wow, that's the best thing ever. Quick, my scribes, you need to write that down because other people will need to know this. It's just like incredibly cute. Okay, I just have to read you this quick little passage because it's just like, it's the cutest thing ever. Okay, so what has kept your warriors alive for all these years? Asked Patrick. Kelty replied, the truth of our hearts, the strength of our arms, and the constancy of our tongues. Tell me, dear Kelt, said Patrick, were there drinking horns or goblets or cups of crystal and shining gold in the houses in which you stayed in the old days? Kelty answered thus, 12 horns and 300, the golden horns of Finn. Oceans of ale they held at the feasting of his men. If our religious life were not being disrupted, our prayers neglected, and our communion with the King of heaven and earth disturbed, we would enjoy conversing with you, good warrior, said Patrick. And then Kelty recites another verse, talking more about the drinking horns. And then at the end of that, may victory and blessing be yours, Kelty, said Patrick, for you have lightened both our spirits and our minds. Tell us another of these glorious tales. I shall, said Kelty. I shall tell you whatever story you desire. Did you and the Fion have horses and chariot teams? Asked Patrick. I just like on and on like that. It's just like the cutest thing. St. Patrick. Okay. Anyways, talking about what I'm doing today. Earlier in the vlog, I was talking about how I went through the story and I made my notes on each chapter and I put that into a paragraph summary form of the book. So I have that printed out. This section from here to here is my summary of the whole first sequence. So it's like 10 chapters. So what I've been doing, I just started last night. What I've been doing is I'm sort of like reading the summary here and then any thoughts that I've had since making this summary on the changes that I want to do, I've been putting down on other paper. So I'm sort of trying to organize some of the thoughts I've had since doing this as I'm reading through it. And there's just so much that's changing, which is great. So there's a lot of things that are staying the same, but the context and the delivery method and things are changing. So anyways, that's what I'm working on today. It's June 2nd. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon. One of my kids stayed home with a fever, and so we're going to pick up the other kid from the bus stop pretty soon. But things are going pretty well. Actually, things are coming together pretty fast at this point. Knock on wood. I don't know if you can see all these. These are my index cards, one card for each chapter. I had been looking at the paragraph outline summary that I had for each chapter. And I got to the point where there was a crossroads where if I kept things the way that I had them in the summary in chapter 6, there were some problems that may need to be dealt with. But if I didn't do that thing in chapter 6, then I would need to rework how the following chapters went for that section. And I was having a really hard time figuring out what I should do. So I decided, when in doubt, do the same thing but pivot it from another angle. So I was like, okay, I'm looking at the paragraph outline right now. What if I literally take one sentence for each of the chapters? What is the actual main action, change, decision thing that happens in each chapter, and can I lay it out like that? And if I lay it out like that, will it be easier to see which of those options I should do? And that did really work. So what I had come up with was that in chapter 6, when I was condensing the action of the chapter, there wasn't a lot of action. It was a really internality heavy chapter because she's reacting to the things that just happened, and we're getting a real sense for the status quo at the time. And so there's a lot of important stuff that's happening, but there's not necessarily a big action taken. So that's why it was going to be a big deal that I had another character making a decision that they let her know about, the female protagonist know about in this chapter. And that was going to be like, okay, twist. Now she has to make a decision about that. But it didn't make sense because just 2 chapters prior to this, her and that person had come to an understanding of what they were going to do. So then 2 chapters later, that person's going to like flip and do something that just didn't make any sense. So I decided, for now at least, I'm not going to have that happen. And when I take out that thread, first of all, it makes the first sequence be able to be 2 entire chapters shorter, which is good. And I think that that's better. And I think there's more narrative drive as well, because then instead of there being like a crossroads thing, we're having that straight line of here's the thing they want. Uh-oh, there's problems. And then, oh, they're just about to get the thing they want. And then, oh, big problem, inciting event. So that just made it so much better. I was able to take a look at sequence 2 as well. And I was able to get a pretty good feel for what I want to happen with that. One of the problems from the first draft was that there were too many really similar scenes about this one event that was going to happen, that character was like, I made a decision, I'm going to do this thing. And then there was going to be like 2 or 3 scenes that were really similar to each other based on that. So instead, now we have just one scene in story about that, and it just makes more sense that way. So just taking out that one thread and then condensing how many times it actually came back in helped the second sequence have a lot more narrative drive. And it's so much easier working with this like pared down, it's only this is the meat of the chapter, and not looking at the words in the chapter at all. Like that would just be such a hold up for where I'm at and what I'm doing right now. So that's where I'm at with this. I don't know, this feels very confused to me. I feel like I'm explaining it in a crazy way. But anyways, it's going well. And it feels like it should be able to be wrapped up soon. I'm pulling in Alyssa. I'm trying to see if I like clipping the mic to other things. It's June 4th. My daughter is well enough at this point to start off the day at school and see how that goes. She was home the last 2 days. Now my son is home because he has a fever. So I don't know. I think the 6th season is not really the fall and the winter. I think the 6th season is like roughly January to December. It's crazy. That's like 12 in the afternoon. And I'm actually about to draft again. So I'm going to do that. And then we'll see how that goes. But I believe we're at the point of finishing this vlog. I don't know what it is about this project because I didn't have this feeling when I was drafting book 3. But I just have this like, I don't know, fear with this project because I love it so much and I've thought about it so much, and I'm just like, I gotta do it good. But it's like you don't have to do it good the first time. So just do it. Just do it. So anyways, I'm gonna go just do it. It's June 11th and I'm 7 chapters into draft 2 at the moment. And it's going well. It doesn't feel like it's another false start. I think I did figure out what I needed to. So thank goodness. I think this is something like 2 hours long at this point, but that's fine. I liked the concept of let's just not stop until it works. So, month and a half later, whatever it is. Let me give you the word count. 11,812 words. So some of those are redrafted, some of them are new material, some of them are from the first draft or draft 1.5. And the next vlog is how that process has been going because I started a new vlog in the beginning of June just documenting that. So if you're curious to see what kinds of changes I'm making from draft 1 to draft 2, go ahead and watch out for that when it comes out. But thank you so much for watching this video. And I hope that your writing is going well, that things in general are going well for you, and I wish you the best. I'll see you in the next video.